Entrepreneurial thinking tools. In this module, we are going to discuss some basic thinking frameworks or thinking approaches that constitute entrepreneurial thinking, that are essential for every entrepreneurial project. And the first thing we have to discuss is entrepreneurial ideas. We hear a lot of misconceptions about entrepreneurs as people with great ideas, be it corporate entrepreneurs or new venture founders, that this one great idea can lead to major success. In practice, actually, this is not exactly true. There is no such thing as a good idea up front. There are only implemented ideas and the ideas that were never tried and never implemented. Also, in my own practice and in the practice of entrepreneurship scholarships, I see lots and lots of examples of really great ideas never seen the light of the day because nobody tried to implement them and learn along the way. And simultaneously, there are lots of bad ideas that ultimately got tried, then improved, then the founders would make some pivots in order to make this work. So, there is no great entrepreneurial ideas up front. There are only implemented ideas and not implemented ideas. Essential part of entrepreneurial thinking is learning by doing. Market is the only authority. It is not the professor, not investors, not venture capitalists, not somebody else who is the authority judging whether idea is good or bad. That's why we have to be really careful about, for example, all these competitions of best entrepreneurial ideas, because ultimately judges might not be the best authority to judge entrepreneurial ideas. The only real judge, the only real authority is market. It is all about whether your innovation is accepted by the market or not. And for this, entrepreneurial ideas have to be, so you have to engage in learning by doing and in planning. On the one hand, you have to do your homework in advance. If your idea is like obviously crappy on paper, most likely in the market it will still remain crappy. But once you have an idea that seems to be working on paper, your financial projections seems to show that if implemented, the idea is going to fly, then you have to give it a try. You have to validate your idea, something that is also an essential part of entrepreneurial thinking, this validation part, learning by doing. So, in summary, no great ideas up front, market is the only authority, and you have to do planning and doing, and learn by doing. Let me give you some examples. Some examples of how entrepreneurs pivoted their ideas from what was initially and what proved to be not that successful. The first company, Tiffany & Company, they started as a provider of stationery and office equipment in 1837. Only in about 20 years, they moved to jewelry, and this made Tiffany & Company what Tiffany & Company is today. But again, they started elsewhere and they were able to pivot into more profitable niche. Colgate, something all these toothpastes that we know, they actually started producing toothpaste only 74 years after the company founding, and initially Colgate was producing soaps and candles and different things related to candles, like all these aroma materials, and only later they moved to toothpaste. So there is no such thing as a great idea. There are only ideas that were tested and implemented or not. Nokia is beautiful because this case is still ongoing. So it was founded in 1865. It is 150 years old company. It moved across different industries from rubber to paper to electronics to cell phones. And what it is going to do right now, nobody really knows. But there is still a chance that the company will be able to reinvent itself. So again, don't wait for a great entrepreneurial idea. You have to, of course, you have to validate, of course you have to do your planning, but ultimately without trying the water you cannot know for sure whether your idea is good or bad. And even bad ideas can be improved with time, as these three examples demonstrate. One more misconception about entrepreneurial ideas. If we read a lot of popular business press or books, it seems like we might get an impression that brilliant ideas emerge fully formed in the minds of geniuses. So there is some thinker who was thinking deeply about fundamental problem in the world, and this person, he or she, came out with a great idea, and this great idea revolutionized the world. In practice, it is not like that. In practice, you usually have to try. You have to try something that might not initially work, but you have to be persistent, and sooner or later you might get it work. Let me talk about this gentleman. This gentleman is James Watt. A lot of people associate Industrial Revolution with the invention of James Watt of steam engine. In practice, James Watt did not invent steam engine. He simply modified the available at that time steam engines to make them work. You can always look in Wikipedia. It is actually quite interesting story about what exactly he did, but he did some... anyway, we have to pay due credit to him. James Watt was able to make this invention actually work and actually make something valuable to everyone. So, James Watt. His first idea came in 1763. So in 1763 he was asked to fix a broken prior generation steam engine, and when he was working with this steam engine, he actually got an idea about how to improve it, how to make sure that you don't need constant supply of water for steam engine to work. It happened in 1763. In 1765, 2 years down the road, James Watt developed the first prototype. So it took James Watt 2 years in order to get to the first prototype. However, the first commercial product got to the market only in 1776, which is essentially 12 years after the first prototype, or 11 years, I'm sorry, after the first prototype, or 13 years after the first idea. So it took James Watt 13 years from the idea towards first commercial product. 13 years when he had to improve his idea. Actually, his first investor went out of business, got bankrupt, so it was only the second investor into James Watt's enterprise who was able to reap any rewards from James Watt's ideas. So, brilliant ideas don't emerge fully formed in the minds of geniuses, in most cases. In most cases, it is all about rigor and discipline. It is all about key role of customers' insights, trying to understand your customers' pains, your customers' frustrations, and moving from these insights towards improving your design of your solution. Key role here of experimentation and prototyping. So entrepreneurial ideas, usually they are premature. You have to improve them as you're validating, as you're doing experimentation and prototyping. And this is where I need to introduce something that I call Entrepreneurial Design Loop. So this Entrepreneurial Design Loop shows how most entrepreneurial projects proceed and get to success. Entrepreneurial Design Loop works in corporate ventures, it works in new ventures, it works for small and medium enterprises, it works in private organizations and public organizations. It is all about how to properly think entrepreneurially. That's why it has broad application. So let us actually take a look. Entrepreneurial Design Loop we start with an inspiration. We start with some problem that we want to solve. After inspiration, we go and get stakeholders' insights. We try to understand who are essential organizations or individuals whom we need to get on board in order for our idea to see the light of the day. So we get stakeholder insights and we try to understand their problems, and we try to formulate solutions to their problem. After that, we get to designing. So designing is designing a business model, designing a solution, prototyping, getting financial projections. All of these things are designing. We design our entrepreneurial idea. Once it is designed, we have to go and validate it. Validating it means testing it with the market, trying to understand whether the market will accept it, whether technology is feasible, whether all this thing is commercially viable. So we go and validate our idea, and in most cases after that we see that the idea will not work and we have to get back to the drawing board to get in stakeholders' insights. So maybe at this stage some of important stakeholders, some partners or your customers will say, no, this idea doesn't make too much sense. And you have to go back to drawing board trying to design something that will make a win-win-win situation for everyone. So you go in this circle again and again and again, and it is totally okay. Almost no idea goes immediately to implementation without going a couple of times in this loop. If you heard the term lean startup is all about going in this circle as fast as possible. So don't waste half a year to write sophisticated business plan. Instead, try to get minimal viable product, try to get some solution to the customer's problems that customers might pay for, and then try to sell it to somebody. If it sells, you can scale it up and keep on implementing it. If it doesn't sell, go in this circle again and again and again, up until you either see that the whole idea is not implementable, there are some real-world problems that simply do not have viable solutions, or you can get some solution that is commercially viable and technologically feasible. So if you get it, if the validation test passed successfully, you go and implement it, you go and scale it up. My personal rule of thumb is the following. You have to go in this circle between getting stakeholders inside, designing and validating. You have to go in this circle again and again and again, up until you're yourself so sure about your model that you're ready to you're ready to go to a bank and go get a home equity loan in order to support your idea. If you yourself are not sure about your idea, your investors will not trust you, or influential organizational managers that must give green light to your corporate venturing idea will not give you green light if you yourself are not sure about it, if the idea is not fully validated. After validation, you go and implement it, scale it up. So this is Entrepreneurial Design Loop, and this ultimately summarizes the view about entrepreneurial ideas. Entrepreneurial ideas come from rigor, discipline, experimentation, and going in loop again and again and again up until you can make something that works. Now, the first part of Entrepreneurial Design Loop is this inspiration. Let's try to see what it is all about. So, inspiration is the starting point, is the driving force for entrepreneurial ideas, for entrepreneurial projects. What is this? So, the most successful entrepreneurial projects start with a problem to solve. They start with a real-world problem of customers, partners, other stakeholders that require solution. And then entrepreneurial process is all about finding a viable, technologically feasible and commercially viable solution to this problem. So problems can be pains, frustrations, constraints. It is all the things that drive people crazy. Find a solution to a problem and people will line up in order to buy your solution. In entrepreneurship, one of the keys to success is to fall in love with a real-world problem, not with your solution, not with technology, not with a product. Fall in love with a problem, not with a solution. And then formulate a solution to this problem. That's why entrepreneurship is not about building multi-billion enterprises, or not only about building multi-billion enterprises. Entrepreneurship is ultimately about solving real-world problems. So, problem is usually the best starting point. However, of course, some ventures start with satisfying some passion. And we all know some of them. So, for example, this is a Mont Blanc pen, quite expensive pen, like really expensive one. Of course, this pen is not solving a real problem of customers, because a much cheaper pen without the name Mont Blanc can be here, can solve the same problem. Mont Blanc is needed to satisfy some passion of users of this pen. So this is also satisfying the passion of customers is also a way to start an entrepreneurial process. The only problem is that if you solve a problem, people will line up in order to buy your solution. If you satisfy a passion, in most cases, you have to persuade your potential customers that they really need to buy from you. You have to invest a lot in marketing, and in general, these type of projects are much more risky. That's why, for example, companies like Apple, large, with huge charismatic leaders, with huge marketing resources, these companies are able to thrive by satisfying the passion of customers, but most startups start with a problem. Most resource-constrained startups start with a problem. Then, Sometimes you have to start with a product. There is nothing wrong about it. So, for example, you are a business development manager of an American company in Canada, and in this case you already have this product from the United States that you have to push to Canadian market. In this case you do start with a product. All entrepreneurial design loop starts with a product. The only problem is that you still usually have to try to understand what kind of problem can you solve for your Canadian customers using this product, and still get back to the problem, starting with a problem, so that people line up in order to buy your solution. Sometimes you have to start with a technology. So there is a new general purpose technology emerging in the market. So we, for example, a great example today is quantum computers. They are still not exactly working, but this quantum computers technology promises to make something magnificent in the future. So you start with a technology, but it's really actually hard to build a commercial viable commercial enterprise around a technology. You still have to get back to some problems that your technology can solve, because technology in itself does not create value. Value is created by solving real-world problems. Sometimes you can start with an industry or a segment. So, for example, all your family has been working in a particular segment, and you also have to start a venture in this segment. As you can think about it, again, you have to ultimately still find a viable problem of customers of this industry, of customers of this segment, in order to start the entrepreneurial process. So, going back, most entrepreneurial ideas come from rigor, discipline, and going in cycles in entrepreneurial design loop. There is no such thing as a great idea up front. And inspiration, as we have discussed, the most promising inspiration for entrepreneurial process, for entrepreneurial thinking, is problems, pains, frustrations, constraints of customers. If you are solving a problem, you usually don't even need to invest millions or billions into marketing. Once there is a solution, people will line up to buy your solution. So let's talk about some problems and solutions as an illustration of entrepreneurial thinking process. This particular example is taken from Fast Company, and it illustrates a good example of concentrating on a problem and then offering an innovative solution to it. So, problem. Let's imagine that you would like to send a coffee maker to your friend, for whatever reason, for your friend's birthday. So, how you are doing it right now? You have to get coffee maker to your home, then you have to try to find a box in which this coffee maker would fit, then you have to then you're trying to find what is the best way to send by mail or by delivery this coffee maker to your friend. Most likely there are so many different options that you will get lost, and ultimately you will end up going to your nearest postal office and sending it as just a regular parcel. You have to stay in line, you don't know how much you are paying. Is there a cheaper way to send it? Coffee maker might not fit into your box, so you might need to send 2 boxes. And it is actually a total disaster. So unless you are sending these coffee makers all the time, if you are doing it at once, it's really a total disaster. This is a problem. So problem is, it is expensive, the information is not available, you have to stand in line, you waste a lot of time, and so on. This is what the company is doing. So the company's solution to this problem is the following. You use a phone in order to make a photo of what you need to send, in this case a coffee maker. Then almost immediately a delivery person comes with a proper box which is suiting perfectly what you need to send. You put whatever you need into this box, and then the company, the shipping company itself, so this innovative shipping company, they themselves find, using their system, the cheapest method that is needed for delivery. And even though you have to pay some commission in order to get this box, in order for delivery person to come to your house, considering the savings that they are creating for you because of selecting the best delivery method, you can actually save the money yourself, plus creating a lot of convenience. So look, we start with a problem. We start with a problem of customers. We start with the frustration of customers who need to send something from one place to another, and we are offering the company is offering an innovative solution to this problem. But we start with a problem. We don't start with a solution. We don't start with a technology or market. Okay. Let's continue talking about entrepreneurial thinking tools. The first was about entrepreneurial ideas. Now let's talk about entrepreneurial uncertainty and entrepreneurial risk. We hear a lot that entrepreneurship is a very uncertain enterprise. Even if you are doing entrepreneurship, corporate entrepreneurship as part of the company, it is still very, very risky, or it leads to risky or uncertain outcomes. And it all comes from our inability to see the future. So, can we see the future? Probably, yes, a little bit. So I know that in the next 5 minutes I will still be recording this video lecture. But can we see enough for proper strategic analysis? Probably no. We really don't know what will happen to our industry 6 months down the road or 1 year down the road. We don't know what will happen to the industry once we introduce our product. We cannot foresee the responses of competitors. We cannot predict the responses of customers to our product perfectly. We can have some broad ideas about the future, but definitely not enough for traditional strategic analysis that we learned in strategic management classes. Things like Porter's 5 forces, pest analysis, SWOT analysis, and so on. So entrepreneurs somehow must deal with this uncertainty. If you are putting something new on the market, you don't know what will be the response, but you somehow have to deal with it. This is where I have to talk to one of the well-known economists. His name is Frank Knight. He was in Chicago, in University of Chicago, and he wrote in 1921, he published a book called Risk, Uncertainty and Profit that dealt with this precise problem. So Frank Knight was the first to discuss what are the types of risks and uncertainty. And the first type of risk is a priori, mathematical probability. So this is mathematical probability that you can calculate in advance. Good example is if you toss a coin or throw dice, you have pretty good understanding of what are the chances of getting certain combination on a dice or getting heads or tails on your coin. This is a priori mathematical probability. This is how most people learn about probability theory using some games from casino, and unfortunately it is not applicable too much outside casino in general. So this is not the right even way to talk about probabilities, because a priori mathematical probability is seen in life only in very artificial circumstances, like casino. Then Frank Knight talked about statistical risk. Statistical risk is all about looking at the past and trying to predict the future on the basis of the past. The whole insurance industry is based on the idea of statistical risk. So it is, we don't know whether this particular office will catch fire in the next year, whether it will or whether it will not. But we have really good understanding of what are the chances that this office will catch a fire on the basis of hundreds of years of observations of similar houses and their chances of getting fire. The same is, for example, if you produce sparkling wine or champagne somewhere in France. Some small percentage of bottles, 5 to 10% of your bottles, will explode during the production process and during the transportation. You don't know which bottle exactly will explode, but it really does not matter, because you know that their number is not going to exceed 10%. So this is statistical risk when you look at the past and you try to predict the future. Unfortunately, when you're getting a new innovative product on the market, so for example, there is a product that I like this particular tablet that allows me to write, to make notes rather than using papers. When you're launching this type of product that has never been on the market before, first, you cannot estimate probability of success a priori, mathematically, like there is no way, it is not like tossing a coin. And second thing, the past cannot really help you with chances of success either, because there was nothing similar on the market before, and you simply don't have enough observations from the past in order to be able to infer anything. So, going back to Frank Knight, he said that there is something called true uncertainty. True uncertainty is when you have no estimation of probability of success or failure. And simultaneously, you generally speaking don't even know how much can you make or how much can you lose. So true uncertainty is what entrepreneurs deal with all the time. I would personally define entrepreneurship as actions that create this true uncertainty, actions that lead to unpredictable outcomes. Either major success or major failures, and you cannot estimate the chances, you cannot put probabilities to these outcomes. So, a priori mathematical probability and statistical risks are just costs. This is something against which you can buy insurance. So, if you are talking about producing these sparkling wines or champagne wines, well, if 10% of them explode during transportation, then ultimately who cares? You just increase your price by 15-20% and you're totally fine. The only source of profit is this true uncertainty. Is when you have to overcome major uncertainty, you have to make huge bets, controllable bets. All entrepreneurship, disciplined entrepreneurship is all about affordable loss principle, about using your means, and so on. But ultimately, the only source of profit is true uncertainty, when you cannot put the probabilities for particular outcomes. True uncertainty is the only source of profit. This idea came from Frank Knight, and it still remains true. If I need to summarize the whole field of strategic management in one slide, this would be this one slide. So strategic management is all about, so the mantra of strategic management is competitive advantage. So strategic management is all about actions, like which industry to compete, which product to introduce, which alliance to form. It is all about actions that will lead to competitive advantage. And by competitive advantage, we mean ability to create superior performance, or what in economics we call rents, ability to command above average profit. So, essence of strategic management is all about actions that lead to competitive advantage, and competitive advantage is all about superior performance. And every textbook in strategic management today, when talking about these sources of competitive advantage, they would talk about three general things. First is all about having market power. This is what Michael Porter from Harvard introduced to strategic management. It is all about smart selection of your industry or your niche, where you have essentially a monopolistic position and you can command premium prices. A good example is Microsoft with Microsoft Office Suite or other Microsoft products like Teams, for example. Whether I like Microsoft Teams or not, I have to use Microsoft Teams simply because everyone else in my ecosystem is using Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft has market power, which allows it to have superior performance. The second source of competitive advantage is having unique resources and capabilities. Something that is valuable, rare, inimitable, non-substitutable. So usually every textbook in strategy, chapter number 3 is about selecting the industry, analyzing the industry, which is all about market power. Chapter number 4 is all about unique resources, how to look internally into your strengths of your organization, how to develop something that nobody else has, something that is valuable. Unique resources, for example, in this particular slide, it is a lens. It is Canon or Nikon lens. So Canon and Nikon photography are two companies, particular Canon, that is known for their precise optics. And then this is their unique resource, unique know-how of producing precise optics. And then they can use this unique resource in order to produce cameras, lenses, copying material, copying equipment, printing equipment, and so on. The third source of superior performance is something called innovator's advantage. Innovator's advantage is all about constant innovating and charging your customers premium prices until you get imitated. by competitors. Good example is Apple in Steve Jobs' time, when Apple introduced a new great, radical new product every 18 months, and up until Samsung was able to catch up, Apple was able to charge whatever they wanted from their loyal customers. Now here is a trick, why I am even talking about all of this. All of these sources of competitive advantage are tightly coupled with overcoming uncertainty, with overcoming true uncertainty. Let's take a look at each of them. Market power. In order to get market power, you have to usually enter into an industry being the first. You don't know in advance whether it will work or not. You have to overcome major uncertainty. For every Microsoft that is out there, there is hundreds and hundreds of other companies that tried to do what Microsoft did with their Office suites, but failed. So market power, you cannot buy it. If you are trying to buy market power, if you are trying to buy Microsoft right now, you have to overpay for it. You have to develop market power, and the market power is developed through initial entrepreneurial actions, through overcoming major uncertainty, when nobody knew back 30 years ago whether what Microsoft was doing will be a success or not. If we look at unique resources, well, you can go and try to buy them on the open market, but the only problem is that whoever is selling these unique resources to you, they will charge you all the possible profit from this unique resource. So, in most cases, unique resources, valuable capabilities and competences have to be developed internally. For many years, Canon has been investing into R&D in precise optics in order to understand how to do it. And there was no guarantee a priori that this will work. Canon had to overcome major uncertainty. And now uncertainty is resolved in its favor, and Canon has this unique resource. Finally, innovator's advantage. So innovator's advantage is all about constant innovating. Constant innovating is all about constantly overcoming the uncertainty. So every time Apple introduces a new product, there is a huge chance that it will be a flop. And right now, looking backwards, it seems like that everything was predicted, that iPad had to be a success, iPhone had to be a success, but actually it is not. Apple had to overcome major uncertainty, and they overcame it successfully. So, essence of strategic management is all about finding ways to build competitive advantage. The point I'm trying to make is that it is always related to overcoming major uncertainty. That's why entrepreneurial thinking are at the core of strategic management. Entrepreneurial thinking is all about doing some actions in order to build market power, in order to acquire unique resources, or in order to constantly innovate. And all the things that we are going to discuss in entrepreneurial thinking, they are applicable to strategic management. Now, we discussed that entrepreneurial uncertainty is the true source of profit, is the only source of profit. But future isn't predictable. What can we do about it? This is where entrepreneurial design loop becomes important again. So, on the one hand, you have to plan your best. You have to do your homework. If your entrepreneurial idea doesn't work on paper or in Excel spreadsheet where you try to get financial performance, if it doesn't work on paper, then it will not work in the real world. But if it works on paper, you still have to go and test it with the market. You still have to try to resolve uncertainty as much as possible. And you have to fail cheap and learn quickly. So, entrepreneurial design loop. Of course, we do a lot of designing. Designing is getting the prototype to test the technical feasibility, building the business model in any framework for business models you like. It is all about getting financial projections, trying to see whether the idea is profitable or not a priori. But then we go and validate it. Then we go and test it. Then we do a pilot launch. Then we talk to potential customers. We talk to potential partners. We do some crowdsourcing or crowdfunding campaign in order to try to see whether people will sign up in order to buy our product, and so on. We go and validate it. And as we are going in this loop more and more, we are reducing entrepreneurial uncertainty. This is the core of entrepreneurial thinking. You start with an inspiration, you start with a problem, you generate some interesting ideas about how to solve this problem, and then you go and validate it. Here is the chart. So the more you validate your idea, the less uncertainty is out there. Of course, there is some residual uncertainty always. There is still a chance that your project will not fly. But the more you validate, the more confident you become that your idea makes sense. Simultaneously, the value of your new venture or value of your corporate venture increases the lower the uncertainty is. So, if you are just a person with a great idea that has not been validated, you have huge uncertainty and the value of your venture is essentially zero. Entrepreneurial ideas are dime a dozen. I personally hear about 10 promising entrepreneurial ideas every week. And it's actually quite fun to see how entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, are trying to make sure that nobody knows about their idea. But this doesn't make that much sense. Until you start validating, until you start moving the uncertainty down, your venture does not cost anything. Only once, the more you validate, the higher the value of your venture is. Angel investors will want to invest once they see that an idea is a little bit validated. Venture capitalists will invest millions of dollars to scale up successfully validated business model. So if we are talking about millions or billions of dollars in market evaluation, the residual uncertainty has to be low. And this gets me to the point that entrepreneurship is a risky enterprise, is uncertain enterprise. But if you do it right, if you validate your ideas cheaply, and if you fail cheaply, and pivot as you see that initial ideas does not work, entrepreneurship does not have to be more risky than, for example, career in corporate world, if you do it right. Entrepreneurial Design Loop is the way to deal with this uncertainty. Now, third tool from the toolbox of entrepreneurial thinking. It is called effectuation. It is a buzzword, it is a popular buzzword in entrepreneurship circles, but it is an important concept that I need to discuss. It is all about strategic flexibility in practice or effectuation mindset. So, effectuation as a concept emerged from the works of Saraswati, who was trying to understand how experienced serial entrepreneurs are making strategic decisions. And what she found out was that most successful serial entrepreneurs they are not so much engaging in rigorous analysis and planning, which is still important. You have to do your homework, you have to see whether industry is profitable, whether business model makes sense, you have to understand how much money you will need. Rigorous analysis and planning is needed. But also you have to be flexible to opportunities as they emerge. So effectuation, basic principles of effectuation as I would formulate them. First, start with what you have rather than what you are trying to achieve. Ask a question. Whom do I know? What are my capabilities? Is there something that I'm the best in the world in, or at least I'm quite competitive worldwide? What do I have? What are my connections? And then think about what I can achieve with what I have. By the way, that's why you usually don't need millions or billions of dollars to start a business if you start with what you have. So, for example, if I look at an example of myself, I know something about corporate innovation practices. So, rather than thinking about starting a billion-dollar company and then trying to mobilize the resources that are needed in order to start that business, I would start with what I have. I know something about corporate innovation practices. Now let's think about which good things I can make, which exciting things I can make having this unique resource. Second thing, effectuation is all about experimentation and flexibility. And that's why you don't need rigorous, rigid planning, because planning will create rigidity in your future actions. It is all about let's try and see what emerges, and let's be flexible and adjust the course as we see the events unfold. Effectuation also has affordable loss principle. Affordable loss principle means treat every project, treat every idea, every product launch as an experiment that might fail. And it is totally okay if it fails. Affordable loss principle means that make sure that you are financially secure as an individual or as a company if the particular experiment fails. Don't bet your farm on one particular technology or product. Real world example, never ever quit college in order to start your entrepreneurial idea, in order to start your new venture. You are violating by this means affordable loss principle. Affordable loss principle is basically says your entrepreneurial venture might not fly. Is this loss affordable to you? If at this stage you dropped out of college, you might never be able to get back to college again. Finally, entrepreneurship is all about partnerships and pro-commitments. So you don't need to you don't need to purchase the resources in order to use those resources. Think about what kind of partnerships can you make. Think about who can pro-commit to your venture. Great example, for example, you can do some crowdfunding where people pre-commit to pay you money for the product that you will develop in the future. Find partners who will support you. That's what effectuation is all about. And this is probably one of my favorite pictures that demonstrates the principles of effectuation. So the photo was taken over 100 years ago, which is one of the first airplanes that investors tried to create. So, going back to effectuation, they started with what they have. They didn't have at that time jet engines, and they are not using jet engines. They are using the technologies at that time. Second thing, experimentation and flexibility. This is just a prototype, and they are ready to adjust it as much as needed. Affordable loss principle. They are not flying this thing for 1 kilometer above the ground. 1 kilometer above the ground, because they understand that most likely this thing will collapse and fall down. They are flying it 2 feet above the ground. This is the affordable loss principle. If it falls on the ground, which is likely to happen, this should not take away life of any of the inventors. So, if you're thinking about your venture, think about this photo. Your venture, either new venture or corporate venture, can you act as these inventors? Start with what you have, be flexible and experiment, and affordable loss principle. Make sure that you don't start flying 1 kilometer up there before the idea is fully validated. Let me get back to affordable loss principle. It is so important that it deserves separate discussion. So, affordable loss principle means evaluate opportunities based on whether the downside is acceptable. What will happen if the opportunity is not implemented? Evaluate opportunities not just on the basis of upside, it can create billions of dollars for me, or it can solve all the world problems, but also can you suffer through the downside? If it is not, then probably you should not try this opportunity. The costs are monetary, opportunity costs including your time. So the whole idea of affordable loss principle is risk little, fail cheap. If you see that the idea does not work, stop investing in it, think about pivoting or abandoning the idea. But if you already invested all your family wealth into a particular idea, then most likely you will stubbornly stick with this idea even when you see that it doesn't work. I know some universities that are trying to be prominent universities in developing entrepreneurs. And for example, if there is a student who is an entrepreneur, this student will get a scholarship and will be able to live on the premises of the university in dorms, like for free, for example, or at a discounted price. And as a result, a lot of entrepreneurs in those universities do not kill their ideas, even if they see that their idea is not getting implemented, in order not to show failure, in order to keep their scholarship, in order to keep themselves in the program. But that's the issue with program design. We have to be able to risk little and fail cheap. If we see that the idea doesn't work, we have to be able to kill it. That's the whole idea of affordable loss principle. Again, it is about opportunities, evaluate opportunities on the basis of what is the downside and can you bear the downside or not, costs, whether costs are affordable or not, and risk. The last thing in terms of entrepreneurial thinking that I would like to talk about is leverage contingencies, or embrace surprise as expected outcome of learning, not just unexpected. Embrace that not only bad things will happen as you are learning by doing, but good things might happen as well. And a great idea, great example of this leveraging contingencies is sildenafil. So sildenafil is a blockbuster drug. Commercial name is Viagra, which brought huge success to Pfizer. But sildenafil was never developed as current Viagra, as erectile dysfunction treatment drug. It was developed as a drug for treating hypertension, high blood pressure, and some sorts of heart diseases. But as the company was testing this formula on humans, they noticed some unintended side effects. And by embracing that good things can happen as well as bad things, they were able to develop this into what is known as Viagra right now, what became a blockbuster drug. So I will not talk more about it. If you are interested, just go to Wikipedia on sildenafil and see there is quite an interesting story about how it was developed. I'm leaving you with this slide in order for you to always remember, don't concentrate only on bad things as you are learning by doing. There might be really good things happening, and try to leverage them as well. As human beings, we are wired to weight threats or some problems more heavily than emerging unexpected successes. Be also prepared to find unexpected successes in whatever you're doing. Thank you.